The war beast bit Caleb Walker. Then, for reasons no one could explain, it simply stopped. That impossible moment became the subject of endless investigations, scientific debates, and whispered legends. People tried to explain the blaring arena alarms, the royal guards frozen with their shock spears half raised, and the reckless courage of a 17-year-old human who had thrown himself between Princess Vea and a creature that outweighed him by nearly 800 pounds. None of that was the real mystery. The mystery began after the bite. The beast, known as Ravik, should have torn Caleb apart in seconds. Every record of its species ended the same way, with shredded armor, broken bones, and a lifeless victim. It had been bred for violence, trained for the arena, and feared across half the galaxy. Instead, Ravik froze. Its massive jaws remained clamped around Caleb's shoulder guard, but it made no attempt to crush him. The creature's crimson eyes, wild only moments before, suddenly lost their murderous focus. It stood perfectly still, as though some forgotten instinct buried deep within its mind had awakened. The arena fell into complete silence. No one moved. No one breathed. And the human boy standing face to face with the galaxy's deadliest predator slowly reached out and placed a hand on its head, not crushing, not tearing, just holding him there, like it had suddenly tasted a word it understood. I was standing 20 feet away when it happened, close enough to see the dust lift from the arena floor when Caleb hit the sand, close enough to hear Vale Ira gasp, close enough to watch every warrior in Housecore realize they had just witnessed a diplomatic disaster in real time. Caleb should not have been there. Humans were invited to observe the blood trial, not interrupt it. They were guests, soft-skinned exchange students from a blue death world with strange manners and too many apologies. The boy had been placed behind the honor line, where visiting species could watch safely, clap politely, and pretend they understood karate tradition. He was not armed. He was not armored properly. His ceremonial training vest looked like something designed by a committee that had never expected him to stand near danger. And honestly, none of us expected danger to care about him. Princess Veilro was the one everyone watched. She stood in the center ring beneath the black banners of her father's house, silver blue skin bright under the arena lights, chin raised, hands steady, trying very hard to look like the daughter of Warlord Draven Kor. The crowd expected her to command Ravik. They expected the beast to test her. They expected fear, maybe failure, maybe a lesson in humility. What they did not expect was the cage lock to open before the horn sounded. Rabbit came out wrong, too fast, too low. Not the measured stalk of a trained trial beast, but a sudden gray blur across the sand. Claws scraping sparks from the stone. Eyes fixed on Valyra before she had even turned. The guards did nothing. They could not. In a blood trial, interference was dishonor. In Housecore, dishonor could follow a family for generations. So the guards froze. The instructors froze. Even Valyra froze for half a second. And half a second was more than Ravik needed. Then the human moved. No speech, no warning, no heroic pose. Caleb Walker crossed the honor line like it was just tape on a gym floor. He hit Vale Ira with both hands, shoved her out of Ravik's path, and took her place before anyone in the arena remembered how to breathe. Ravik slammed into him with the force of a shuttle crash. Caleb went down hard, one knee carving through the sand, one hand braced against the beast's chest, his face twisted for one sharp second, before going strangely calm. Valyra shouted his name. Someone called for medics. The warlord's private guard finally broke formation, but Caleb did not scream. He did not beg. He did not even pull away. He looked straight into Ravik's burning eyes, swallowed once, and said in plain English, quiet enough that my translator almost missed it. Easy. That single word did more than the alarms, more than the guards, more than every command shouted from the stands. Ravik's ears flattened, its breathing changed. The beast that had broken veteran handlers and made grown soldiers step backward, loosened its grip by 1 inch. 1 inch was enough to silence the arena, because in karate culture, a war beast only released for 3 reasons: fear, submission, or recognition. And whatever Ravik saw in that human boy from Earth, it was not prey. To understand why every karate warrior in that arena looked terrified of a quiet human boy, you need to understand how little respect humans had before that day. They were not hated. Hatred would have required taking them seriously. Humans were treated like a diplomatic courtesy species, the kind of soft little civilization powerful houses invited to ceremonies so the Galactic Council would praise their generosity. They smiled too much. They said, "Excuse me," when someone twice their size stepped on their boots. They wore cloth instead of armor and carried water bottles, like survival depended on constant sipping. Caleb Walker had arrived 3 weeks earlier, with one travel bag, one outdated translation pin, and the calm expression of someone who had already decided not to be impressed by anything. That annoyed people, not because he was rude. He was not. He held doors open for species with forearms. He helped younger cadets find classrooms. He once apologized to a maintenance drone after bumping into it. The problem was that he never acted scared at the correct moments. When the karate combat choir thundered before morning drills, Caleb only blinked and asked if it was a school tradition. When gravity training shifted to 1.6 Earth standard, half the visiting students needed medical seats. But Caleb stretched his shoulders and said it felt like a heavy backpack day. When a senior warrior showed him a ceremonial blade longer than Caleb's arm, the boy leaned closer and said, "Nice balance." That was it. Nice balance. The entire weapons hall went silent. Still, nobody called him dangerous. They called him strange. That was safer. Strange could be ignored. Dangerous required admitting that a pale 17-year-old boy from Earth might belong in places where real warriors tested bloodlines. Princess Vailra noticed him before the others did. I saw it happen during the third afternoon of his visit. She was practicing command posture in the outer ring, while 6 young nobles pretended not to laugh behind her back. Vila Kaur was royalty, but royalty did not mean comfort among the karate. Her father had conquered 3 moons before he turned 30. Her mother had once ended a border war by walking alone into the enemy flagship and walking out with its surrender codes. Vailira had inherited the name, the banners, the expectations, and none of the mercy. She trained until her hands shook. She stood straight, even when exhausted. She never complained, and still the young nobles whispered that she was polished silver over soft clay. Caleb heard them. Everyone heard them. Nobody moved because karate insults were part of karate education, or so they told themselves. Caleb just looked over from the visitor rail and asked one simple question. "Do you guys train here, or just review each other?" The laughter died so fast it felt like someone had cut the air. Vailira stared at him like he had just stepped in front of a plasma cannon for fun. The nobles did not challenge him. That was the first odd thing. They looked at his eyes, then at his hands, then suddenly remembered urgent duties elsewhere. After that, Vailira started watching Caleb, the way hunters watch weather. Not with fear, with attention. She noticed how he stood near exits without thinking, how he tracked movement and reflections, how loud noises made every alien flinch while Caleb simply located the source. She once asked him why humans acted gentle, if Earth was truly as dangerous as the records claimed. Caleb shrugged and said, "Because being polite keeps people from finding out what you are like when you are not." Vailira did not understand the answer. Then none of us did. We thought Earth's reputation was exaggerated. Another human story inflated by dramatic ambassadors and survival statistics. Nobody bothered to verify. We had seen Caleb carry books, not weapons. We had seen him laugh softly at cafeteria jokes. We had seen him let smaller species cut ahead of him in food lines. That was the version of humanity we preferred. Convenient, harmless, easy to place behind the honor line. So when the blood trial began, we positioned Caleb with the observers. Far from the sacred sand, far from the beast cage, far from anything that mattered. We thought that was where a human belonged. Looking back now, that was the funniest mistake House Kaur ever made. Vilara Kaur had been trained since childhood to never look uncertain, which was unfortunate, because the entire arena had been built to expose uncertainty. The blood trial was not a school event, not really. The academy called it Cultural Demonstration Week, but that was the polite council-approved name printed on visitor schedules. House Kaur called it what it was, a public measurement of nerve. The arena floor was a circle of black stone and pale sand, 100 feet across, surrounded by rising seats packed with cadetses, instructors, nobles, guards, and visiting officials, who had all come to see whether the warlord's daughter could command the beast her family had failed to tame for 3 generations. Vailira stood alone in the center, wearing light ceremonial armor that looked impressive from a distance, and terribly thin up close. Her silver-blue skin reflected the overhead lights. Her dark crest was braided back in the style of housecore heirs. She held no weapon. That was the point. Any fool could threaten a beast with a blade. A true karate heir was supposed to rule with presence. At least that was what the old instructor said, while standing safely behind reinforced barriers. Valira's face gave away nothing, but I saw her left hand twitch once. Only once. Caleb Walker saw it too. He was behind the honor line with the other observers, arms folded loosely, not bored, not impressed, simply watching. His eyes moved from Valera to the cage, from the cage to the guards, from the guards to the noble families seated high on the eastern platform. That was another thing about humans we failed to appreciate. They did not just look at danger. They looked for the part of the room that wanted danger to happen. Up on the platform, Lord Melrick Core smiled too early. He was Draven's cousin, which in housecore politics meant close enough to claim loyalty and far enough away to dream of replacing him. Merrick had spent the morning praising Vale Ira's courage, in a voice that made every compliment sound like a trap. He said the trial would prove whether blood still remembered command. He said young heirs needed pressure. He said housecore could not afford softness. Warlord Draven listened without blinking. Seated beneath the largest black banner, massive hands resting on the arms of his iron chair. He did not defend his daughter. He did not comfort her. Among the karate, comfort before a trial was considered an insult. Vale Ira knew that. She lifted her chin when the announcer called her name. The crowd answered with a low drumbeat of armored fists against stone. Boom, boom, boom. It rolled through the arena like thunder trapped indoors. The cage at the far end shuddered. Something inside exhaled hard enough to stir the sand. Ravok. The beast was not just large. Large would have been simple. Ravok had the ugly confidence of a creature that had never needed permission to enter a room. 6 heavy limbs. A ridge of dark bone along its spine. Eyes the color of heated copper. It watched Valera through the bars with the stillness of something, deciding whether tradition mattered. The handlers stood beside the release console, each wearing shock gauntlets, and the nervous expressions of people pretending their equipment made them brave. The announcer raised one hand. By law, the horn would sound first, then Valera would speak the command phrase, then the cage would open. That was the order. That was sacred. That was safe. Or as close to safe as karate traditions ever got. Caleb leaned forward slightly. Not much. Just enough for me to notice. His gaze had fixed on the eastern platform. Lord Make's smile had widened. One of his attendants touched a hidden device beneath his sleeve. The horn had not sounded yet. Valera had not spoken. The cage lock clicked open. Anyway, the wrong sound came first. Not the horn, not the announcer, not Valera's command phrase, just a clean mechanical click that every handler in the arena recognized 1 second too late. The cage door dropped 6 inches, then a foot, then slammed into the sand with a heavy final thud. For one strange heartbeat, Ravok did not move. The beast stood inside the open frame, copper eyes fixed on Valora, body low, breath rolling out in slow white clouds. Despite the heat of the arena lamps, that was when the crowd understood something had gone very wrong. A trained trial beast waits for the challenge phrase. Ravok had not been challenged. A bonded beast tests the air. Ravok had not been bonded. A controlled beast circles. Ravok did not circle. It launched. The handlers shouted commands over each other, all authority and no control. Their shock gauntlets sparked uselessly at their sides because stepping into the sacred ring before first contact would mark them as cowards before every noble house watching. The guards reached for weapons and stopped, trapped by the same old law they had sworn to defend. Housecore had built its reputation on discipline. In that moment, discipline looked a lot like fear wearing formal armor. Vale returned, just as Ravok crossed the first 20 feet. She did not run. I will give her that. Whatever else the nobles said about Draven's daughter, she had courage. She planted her feet, lifted her right hand, and tried to speak the command phrase. The first word came out steady. The second never made it. Ravok was too fast. Sand exploded beneath its limbs. The black banners snapped in the pressure wave of its charge. Every instinct in my body told me to look away, because there are moments when history becomes too heavy to watch. Caleb Walker did the opposite. He moved toward it. No one ordered him. No one gave him permission. No one even seemed to notice until he had already crossed the honor line. One of the visiting officials gasped. A karate instructor shouted, "Human, stop." Caleb did not stop. Later, the Academy security system slowed the footage down frame by frame, trying to explain how a boy with no combat implants covered 40 feet before train guards finished drawing breath. The official report called it adrenaline. The warlord called it instinct. I call it the first honest thing that happened in that arena. Caleb hit Valera from the side with both palms. Not hard enough to hurt her, just hard enough to move her out of the path. She could not see anymore. She stumbled across the sand, caught herself, and looked back with fury already forming on her face. Then she saw what had taken her place. Caleb stood between her and Ravik, with nothing but a thin ceremonial vest, scuffed boots, and the kind of calm that makes every warrior in the room feel suddenly overdressed. Ravik struck him like a wall of muscle and storm. Caleb dropped to one knee, but he did not fold. One hand locked against the beast's chest. The other grabbed the edge of its plated neck, not attacking, not panicking, simply holding on, as if this were a bad horse on an old Earth ranch, and not the most feared creature in the karate kennels. The impact should have thrown him 10 feet. It did not. The beast's jaws closed around the reinforced shoulder of his vest, and the arena finally found its voice. Valera shouted for him. The crowd surged. The guards broke formation. Lord Mel stood halfway from his seat, his perfect smile gone. And above them all, Warlord Dravenkor leaned forward for the first time all day. Caleb's face had gone pale, but his eyes stayed locked on Ravik. He breathed once, twice. Then while every alien in the arena waited for the fragile human to collapse, Caleb spoke to the beast in a low, steady voice. "Easy, big guy. Wrong target." Ravik froze. That was the first time I heard a karate arena go completely silent. Not quiet, silent. There is a difference. Quiet is what happens when people wait. Silent is what happens when every mind in the room reaches the same impossible conclusion and refuses to say it first. Ravik should have finished the motion. That was what warbeasts did. They did not hesitate, because someone spoke softly. They did not pause because a small off-world student used a friendly tone. They did not freeze with their jaws locked around ceremonial armor, while the entire ruling class watched from polished stone seats. Yet there it was still as a statue, except for the slow rise and fall of its ribcage. Caleb Walker stayed on one knee in the sand, one hand pressed against Ravik's chest, the other resting near the beast's neck plates. His shoulder guard was bent, his vest was torn. His face was pale in that alarming human way, but his expression had settled into something almost bored. Not bored exactly, focused like the rest of us were making too much noise during a difficult math problem. Princess Valera took one step toward him. Caleb did not look back. "Stay behind me," he said. She stopped. That might have been the second impossible thing. Valera Kor, daughter of Warlord Draven, raised beneath banners that taught obedience only to strength, obeyed a human boy without arguing. Maybe it was his voice. Maybe it was the beast. Maybe it was the way Caleb had not asked. Around the ring, the guards finally entered, spreading out in a careful half-circle. Shock spears raised but not aimed. Nobody wanted to be the first to provoke Ravik. Nobody wanted to be the second either. The lead handler kept repeating command codes into his wrist device, each one sharper than the last. Ravik ignored him. The device flashed red. Failed. 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 That word appeared in 12-foot letters on the arena display, which was not ideal for public confidence. Lord Melek recovered enough to point toward the sand. "Restrain the animal," he barked. "The trial has been contaminated." Contaminated? That was the word he chose. While Caleb knelt there, holding the mistake Mykri had arranged, a few nobles murmured approval, because nobles will applaud almost anything if it sounds official. Then Warlord Draven lifted one finger. The murmuring died. He did not speak yet. He only watched. Caleb shifted slightly, and Ravik's copper eyes snapped back to him. Every guard tightened. Caleb did not. He breathed in through his nose, slow and steady, then loosened his grip on the beast by half an inch. A handler hissed, "Human, do not move." Caleb gave a tiny laugh. Not loud, not mocking, just tired. Little late for that. The translator carried it perfectly. Several cadets stared at him like he had lost his mind. I thought the same thing until I noticed Ravik's ears. They were no longer pinned flat in attack posture. They were angled forward, listening. Caleb noticed too. Of course he did. Humans notice the worst things at the worst times, and somehow make that everyone else's problem. You are scared, Caleb said quietly. Not to the crowd, not to the warlord, but to Ravok. Yeah, I get that. The beast's throat vibrated with a low warning sound. It was not a roar, not yet. The arena floor trembled under my boots. Caleb leaned closer instead of away. That was when the medical scanner finally swept over him from above and projected his vitals for the emergency team. The numbers appeared beside his name. Elevated heart rate, stable breathing, controlled stress response, pain markers high, consciousness clear. The medics froze. One of them whispered, "That cannot be right." Because according to the scanner, Caleb was in serious pain, fully aware of it, and choosing to treat the situation like an awkward conversation with a large angry dog. Valera heard the medic. Her expression changed. Not pity, not guilt, recognition. She was beginning to understand what Ravik already had. Caleb Walker was not calm because he was safe. He was calm because Earth had taught him that panic was optional. The scanner did not just disagree with the medics. It insulted their entire understanding of biology. One emergency drone lowered over Caleb's shoulder and painted him in blue diagnostic light, searching for shock, collapse, loss of consciousness, anything normal species did after being caught by a war beast. The drone found none of it. It chirped twice, recalculated, and projected a new warning across the arena display. Classification conflict. The words hung above the sand like a public embarrassment. A senior medic slapped the side of her console, as if the machine had personally offended her. "Run it again," she ordered. The drone ran it again. Classification conflict. Ravik still had Caleb pinned in place, but the beast had stopped acting like an attacker and started acting like it was studying a problem. Its nostrils flared near Caleb's torn shoulder guard. It breathed him in once, twice, then made a sound no handler wanted to hear. Not rage, not hunger, confusion. The lead handler went gray beneath his scales. "It tasted him," he whispered. That was when the old records came back to me. War beasts did not think like citizens. They did not care about titles, flags, uniforms, or royal blood. They recognized only three things: threat, weakness, and pack. Every karate child knew that. Every handler built their life around it. Ravik had charged Valera because someone had turned the trial into chaos. It had found Caleb instead. And now the beast could not decide where to place him. The arena systems tried to help. They sampled the air around Caleb, analyzed stress chemicals, muscle response, body heat, breath rhythm, and whatever trace markers Earth biology released under pressure. The result should have been simple. Human, male, 17 years old, 172 pounds, 6'1" inch. No armor certification, no approved combat implants. Visitor status only. Instead, the display flickered, stuttered, and added a second line beneath his name. Prey classification failed. That was the moment the crowd began to move backward. Not a stampede. Karate nobles were too proud for that. But I watched armored boots slide one careful inch away from the railing. I watched instructors lower their voices. I watched Lord Morrick's face harden, because his perfect little accident had become something else. Valera saw the words too. Her eyes went from the display to Caleb, then to Ravok, then back to Caleb. She looked ashamed for a second, but Caleb still did not turn around. He kept his attention on the beast like looking away would be rude. "You are not bad," he said softly. "Someone opened your cage wrong." Ravok's ears twitched. The translator did not know what to do with that, because Caleb was not speaking karate command language. He was speaking the nonsense humans use with nervous animals, small children, and apparently living siege engines. The terrible part was that it worked. Ravik loosened another inch. The guards noticed. The handlers noticed. Warlord Draven noticed most of all. He stood then, and every banner guard in the arena straightened like lightning had passed through their spines. Draven descended from his iron chair one step at a time, slow, deliberate, massive enough to make the stone stairs look temporary. Lord Melek moved to intercept him. "Cousin, the human has disrupted the sacred trial. The beast must be removed, and the girl must repeat the ceremony under clean conditions." Draven did not look at him. That was worse than anger. "Clean conditions," the warlord repeated. 2 words, flat as a sealed coffin. Melek's throat worked once. Caleb finally shifted his weight, and Ravik gave a low rumble. Every spear lifted. Caleb raised one hand, palm out, without looking at the guards. Do not. A human visitor told House Corps' armed guard to stand down. And for reasons none of us wanted to examine yet, they did. Ravik's eyes stayed on Caleb. Caleb's eyes stayed on Ravik. The display above them flashed one final diagnostic line before the medics shut it off in panic. Apex response detected. Nobody breathed because the machine had not said Ravik. It had said Caleb. The arena had survived siege drills, honored duels, royal trials, and one memorable graduation ceremony involving an experimental gravity drum. It had never survived a human making eye contact with a war beast and telling everyone else to be quiet. Caleb Walker did not shout. That was what made it worse. Shouting would have made sense. Shouting belonged in an arena. Commands belonged there. Threats belonged there. Caleb gave neither. He lifted his hand toward the guards, palm steady, and the entire armed line hesitated like they had just reached the edge of a cliff in the dark. Ravik felt that hesitation. The beast's eyes flicked toward the spears, then back to Caleb. Its grip tightened just enough to make the damaged shoulder guard creak. Valyra took a sharp breath. Warlord Draven stopped halfway down the stairs. Even Lord Ma stopped pretending he was in control. Caleb noticed none of them, or maybe he noticed all of them, and decided they were not the problem worth solving first. Hey, he said to Ravok, look at me. The beast rumbled low enough to shake dust from the black stone. It was a warning sound, the kind that usually ended conversations before they became mistakes. Caleb answered by moving closer. Not away, closer. He slid his braced knee forward through the sand, slow enough that no one could call it an attack, bold enough that every handler in the arena looked ready to faint standing up. Ravik's head lowered until its copper eyes were level with Caleb's. The human boy should have looked small then. He was trapped beneath a creature built like a living fortress, surrounded by nobles who thought mercy was a training flaw, washed by a warlord who had broken armies with a signature. But small is not the same as weak. Earth teaches that lesson differently. On Earth, tiny things can carry storms. Quiet forests can hide teeth. Calm water can drown mountains 1 inch at a time. Caleb raised his other hand and placed it flat against Ravik's snout. The handlers made a collective sound that translated poorly, but meant something close to absolutely not. Caleb ignored them. Easy, he said again. Ravik opened its mouth slightly, just enough for Caleb to pull his shoulder free from the damaged armor. He did not jerk away. He did not scramble backward. He stayed there, hands still resting on the beast, breathing slow, forcing the entire arena to watch a human treat their nightmare like a scared animal that had been lied to. Then Ravok roared. The sound hit the stands like a pressure wave. Nobles flinched. Cadets ducked. One of the visiting officials dropped his data tablet and pretended he meant to. Valyra stepped forward on instinct. Caleb finally looked at her just for a second. I said, stay back. She froze again, furious and frightened and alive. Ravok roared a second time, louder, closer, right into Caleb's face. The beast expected the human to break eye contact. Every species did. That was how dominance worked. You yielded or you challenged. You submitted or you fought. Caleb didn't either. He inhaled once, his shoulders squared. His expression went empty in the way prey never looks empty. Then he made a sound back. It was not a scream. It was not language. It was low, rough, and old. Pulled from somewhere beneath manners, beneath school uniforms, beneath every polite human habit the galaxy had mistaken for weakness. The translator failed completely. The arena did not. Every karate in the stands understood the shape of it. Not the words, the meaning. Enough. Ravik stopped mid-breath. Its ears lowered, its spine ridge flattened, its front limbs bent. Not from injury, not from fear exactly, but from recognition. The great beast dropped its head until its brow touched the sand at Caleb's feet. Nobody moved. Nobody applauded. Nobody dared. Caleb kept his hand on Ravik's snout and let out one tired breath. Good boy, he said. And that was when Warlord Dravencore reached the arena floor, looked at his daughter, looked at the bowed beast, then looked at the human boy bleeding through borrowed armor, and said the words that changed the trial forever. The beast has chosen its witness. Warlord Dravencore did not rush. That was the terrifying thing about him. Everyone else in the arena had moved too fast, or not fast enough. Guards had hesitated. Handlers had shouted. Nobles had whispered themselves into corners. Caleb Walker had crossed a forbidden line and somehow made a war beast bow. But Draven took each step across the sand like time belonged to his family and had only been lending itself to the rest of us. Ravik stayed low at Caleb's feet, massive head lowered, copper eyes half closed, breathing in slow waves that stirred the dust around the boy's boots. Caleb looked tired now. Not weak, tired. There is a difference. And by then, even the youngest cadets understood it. Weakness asks the room for mercy. Tiredness wonders how much longer the room plans to be stupid. Valira moved toward him again. Slower this time, her hands open, her voice unsteady for the first time all day. Caleb? He glanced back and gave her the smallest nod. You okay? It was such a human question. Absurd. Backward. Completely insane. He was the one with torn armor. He was the one kneeling in sacred sand with a beast the size of a ground car resting at his side, and he asked if she was okay. Vale Ira stared at him as if the translator had failed. It had not. Draven heard it too. I saw something shift behind his iron expression. Not softness. Never softness. Recognition. The warlord stopped 10 feet from Caleb and looked down at Ravik. The beast did not rise. It did not bare its teeth. It did not challenge him. That alone would have filled 3 chapters in any handler's manual. Ravik respected Draven. Everyone knew that. But respect was not the same as obedience. And right then, Ravik was waiting for Caleb, not the warlord. Draven turned his head toward the handler station. Who opened the cage? No one answered. The question rolled up into the noble seats and found Lord Ma standing too straight beside his attendant. Draven did not accuse him. He did not need to. Powerful people often believe guilt hides behind distance. They forget silence travels. Valira followed her father's gaze. So did Caleb. Maury spread his hands with offended dignity. A malfunction during a sacred trial is regrettable, cousin, but the greater issue is the human's interference. He crossed the honor line. He contaminated the rite. By law, the trial is void. A few nobles nodded, because cowardice sounds better when dressed as tradition. Caleb blinked at him. You opened the cage early. No one breathed. Maelor's eyes narrowed. Mind your place, human. Caleb looked down at Ravok, then back up at him. I did. That was all. 2 words. No threat. No speech. Just a reminder that his place had been between a charging beast and Morik's target. Draven's mouth did not smile. But something worse happened. His respect became visible. He faced the crowd and the arena straightened under the weight of his silence. The human crossed the honor line. Draven said to shield my daughter. When karate law froze karate hands, he stood where warriors debated permission. He offered blood before nobles offered truth. Ravik tested him and did not find prey. Lord Melik's face changed color. Draven stepped closer to Caleb, then did something no one expected. He lowered his head. Not a bow, not fully, but enough. Enough for every banner camera to capture it. Enough for every House representative to understand that the warlord had just placed public honor on a human boy from Earth. Valira covered her mouth with one hand, not from fear, but because she understood the size of what had just happened. Draven extended his armored hand toward Caleb. Resting in his palm was a black metal band shaped like a curved fong, small enough to fit around a human wrist, old enough that even the instructors whispered when they saw it. The black fong mark, a symbol not given to allies, not given to guests, given only to those house corps considered shield-bound. Caleb looked at it, then at Draven. Sir, I do not know what that means. Draven's eyes stayed fixed on him. It means the next creature that mistakes you for weak will answer to my house. Ravik gave a low, approving rumble. Caleb sighed like someone had just handed him extra homework. Okay, he said. That sounds useful. And for the first time in recorded history, Warlord Dravencorps laughed in the blood trial arena. The laugh lasted less than 2 seconds, but it did more damage to House Corps politics than any speech could have. Warlord Dravencorps did not laugh for guests. He did not laugh for nobles. He did not laugh when treaties were signed, enemies surrendered, or rival houses sent gifts wrapped in apology silk. Yet there he stood in the sacred sand, laughing because a human boy with a damaged shoulder guard had accepted one of the oldest honors in karate history, like someone had handed him a parking pass. That was when everyone understood the trial was over, even though no horn had sounded. Valira crossed the remaining distance and stopped beside Caleb close enough to see the black fong mark resting in his hand. Her voice came out soft. "You should let the medics look at you." Caleb glanced at the emergency team, then at Ravik, who had not moved more than 6 in 7 from his side. "Will he let them?" he asked. Valera looked at the beast. The beast looked back. The medics looked like they were suddenly reconsidering their career choices. Draven answered for them. "Ravik will permit what you permit." That sentence passed through the arena like a cold wind. Caleb did not seem to notice the weight of it. He only looked down at the massive creature and said, "They are helping. Be nice." Ravik huffed once, then lowered its head again. The medics approached slowly, scanning Caleb with the careful movements of people who had just learned that their patient came with a living security system. Caleb sat on the sand without complaint, while Valera knelt beside him, her royal armor dusty, her perfect trial image completely ruined, and somehow stronger for it. Up in the noble seats, Lord Mike tried to leave. He made it 3 steps. Draven did not raise his voice. Cousin Merrick stopped. Every camera turned. Every banner recorder focused. Draven looked at him the way mountains look at weather. "The cage malfunction will be investigated." Merrick swallowed. "Of course. Publicly." That word landed harder than a verdict. Malikri's attendants shifted away from him by a respectful and very revealing distance. Caleb watched the exchange, then leaned toward Valera and asked, "Is he always like that?" Valera, still staring at her father, whispered, "Only when someone is about to regret surviving a conversation." Caleb nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Cool." The medics finished their first scan and announced that Caleb would recover with treatment and rest. The crowd reacted with confusion because humans had a strange talent for making survival sound routine. The visiting officials began sending emergency reports before they even left their seats. The Academy updated Caleb's student file from diplomatic observer to restricted threat consideration. The handlers requested permission to retire early. Ravik refused to return to its cage until Caleb stood. When he finally did, the beast rose with him, not ahead, not behind, beside him. That image spread across the network before sunset. The warlord's daughter on one side, the untamed beast on the other, and between them, a pale human boy from Earth, wearing the black fong mark, like he still did not understand why everyone was staring. By morning, 3 noble houses sent formal apologies for previous comments about human fragility. By noon, the Galactic Council requested a revised Earth biology briefing. By nightfall, every karate child in the Academy was repeating the same lesson in whispers: "Do not measure humans by claws. Do not measure them by armor. Do not measure them by how politely they stand behind the line, because lines are only real until a human decides someone needs help on the other side." Valera completed her blood trial 2 days later. Ravik obeyed her command, but only after glancing at Caleb in the stands as if checking whether the human approved. Draven noticed. So did everyone else. And that was the real gift, the one hidden beneath the black metal band in the public honor. Caleb had not been rewarded because he survived. He had been marked because Ravik had told the oldest truth in the room before any of us were brave enough to say it. Earth did not raise prey. Earth raised quiet monsters with gentle manners.